Hello, Coach Kyle here with a screencast on Level 3 constraints. I highly recommend you watch the first 3 screencasts that lead up to this one. The introduction on constraint-based training session designs, the screencast on Level 1 constraints, and the screencast on Level 2 constraints. Let's dive right in. Level 3 constraints are designed to reinforce and test skills that athletes have developed first in the level 1 constraints where they're building skill, then in the level 2 constraint where they're refining and strengthening skill, and now finally they are testing and reinforcing these skills in representative learning environments. So environments that are representative of the tournaments they're going to be competing in. So the goal of level 3 constraints, you guessed it, test and reinforce skill. We do that by creating, the coach needs to create and then apply representative learning design. So we need to make it real. So just like level 1 constraint should aid athletes, amplify feedback, invite new movement solutions, and also destabilize old bad movement patterns or habits, level 3 constraints should tire, that is, test in realistic environments. Oops, sorry, I wrote conditions. That's a C. So test in realistic environments. So this means the coach needs to manipulate the task, individual, or the environment. And if you recall, those are the 3 basic categories, the basic building blocks of constraints that we looked at in the introductory video for constraint-based training sessions. And we want to manipulate these 3 categories, task, individual, or environment, to create or mimic tournament-like conditions. And the athlete needs time applying and adapting the skills that they've developed in previous constraints. They need to apply and adapt them now in these more realistic conditions, because skills just don't automatically transfer. We need to skills don't always transfer perfectly to new conditions because the perception, an athlete's perception, actually ends up changing how they act or their motor behaviors. So it's important with level 3 constraints to create realistic conditions that mimic tournaments. So let's refer to the constraint categories again and consider how to develop level 3 constraints. So level 3 ingredients, again, it's a return to basics. You're going to choose 1, 2, or 3 categories of constraints to make these constraints as realistic as possible, representing tournament-like conditions. Maybe you start out by constraining just one of these categories, and then maybe as the athlete improves, you add all 3 to really increase the level of challenge when they're ready for it. So with the task, for example, let's scoot down to equipment used. What would be realistic? How can we constrain that? And what would be realistic? Well, it is possible that an athlete loses equipment on the way to a tournament. Can they shoot well with their backup equipment or other equipment borrowed from somebody else? What about the timing protocol? It is possible that they run out of time in a tournament and they need to shoot some arrows rather quickly. Can they do that with the skills they've developed with the level 1 and 2 constraints? Now is the time to test that and to reinforce their skills. Now for the individual, this is where we want to know, can the athlete perform these skills that we've developed earlier when they're tired, when their heart rate is up, when they are feeling like they're lacking the endurance, or when their attention is distracted. And then for environment, this is where we want to know where it is that the athlete's going to be competing and try to represent that environment in the best way possible. Maybe it's the colors that people around them are wearing for their competition clothing. Maybe it is the amount of wind that's coming through, the angle of the sun. Might it rain there? So how can we make sure this athlete's going to experience rain and getting their equipment wet? Temperature, all of those aspects. So when you take these 3 categories into account, then we can begin to develop level 3 constraints that look like this. Let's imagine there's a learning outcome. By the end of the week, the athlete will be able to execute the 8 mental steps of the shot cycle, 5 out of 6 arrows, 3 ends in a row, after jump roping. And the reason why they're jump roping is because we want to elevate their heart rate to 160 BPM before each end, because we also want them practicing that 3 mountain, 1 plateau breathing cycle to reduce heart rate. Well, in stage 1 of this athlete, the athlete's going to use the jump rope to elevate the heart rate. Then they'll approach the shooting line while putting the quiver on, because you can't jump rope with a quiver on. And then they'll use the breathing cycle to reduce their heart rate by 40 beats per minute. And they're going to do that within 50 seconds and then execute the 8 mental steps. Step 2, okay, do that same thing, but do it while scoring. And make sure it's, the ends are timed, 4-minute ends outdoors. And then, okay, now can they perform this while competing against another person, maybe another person in their club that they have a friendly rivalry with. And you can see how you can build this progressively up to something that's going to feel like a tournament. That's just one example. I hope that you're able to find the creativity within you and the information I've given you to develop other ones too. I have some reflection questions for you here. Go ahead and pause the video, consider what the answers might be for yourself, and I'm going to go through the answers now. So if level 1 constraints build skill and level 2 constraints strengthen and refine skills, what do level 3 constraints do? Well, level 3 constraints need to, level 3 constraints need to test and refine skills. And what is the overarching goal of level 3 constraints? Level 3 constraints need to tire. That is, they need to test skills in realistic environments. Okay, so, and what are 3 different ways a coach can constrain a task, the athlete, in the environment to create RLDs? Well, for a task, the coach could manipulate timing. And then after that experience of manipulating the timing, talk through with the athlete and find out how their experience of the shot cycle was different. So that's an important piece that we need to consider. It's not just about having the experiences, but figuring out, allowing the athletes to explore this new experience and then reflect on it. All right. For the athlete, you can manipulate a variety of different things, let's say heart rate, and then for the environment, we could manipulate wind, rain, things like that. For stage of motor learning, athletes need to be an autonomous stage of motor learning for this, and the coach can always follow up with reflection questions to see how the athlete was engaging with the process, how productive was their exploration, and what did they discover about how they need to adapt their skills in more realistic learning and tournament environments. I hope this was helpful, and reach out if you have any questions.